Listen close, the worst kind of dare started a marriage. At noon they spoke vows with boundaries. By nightfall the town would question everything. Before the month is out, a wall of fire will test those vows, and she'll face an offer that could set her free. Or end them. Abilene, 1883. A proud rancher spoke. A quiet widow kept her dignity. If you like slow burn love and hard work, stay with me. Rose Harper walked into town at first light. Dust clung to her hem. Smoke lived in her shawl from the kitchen blaze that took her roof 2 months ago. She carried a basket of eggs and 2 jars of blackberry jam. Abilene woke slowly. Horses snorted steam, the church bell rang once, and men drifted toward the Golden Star. Rose did not plan to step inside. The grocer waved off her eggs, saying the railroad made folks picky. Laughter from the saloon hooked her ear. Then the sheriff's voice rolled out, steady as a plow. "Keep the bets clean," Sheriff Tom Avery said. "Cards only." Curiosity pulled Rose 2 steps. She stopped just inside where sawdust drank the sun and smoke hung thin. Heads turned toward a back table. Jeb Callahan sat there, hat tipped, smile tight. Everyone knew him. 3 sections west of the ridge, more grass than water, 1,000 fences. "Hard but fair," folks said. "Proud too." A rival hand leaned in. "One more hand, Callahan. Stallion against stallion. And sweeten it, if you win, marry the widow Harper. Show you're more than wind on a horse." Laughter jumped like a match. Rose's cheeks warmed, then cooled. She gripped the basket so the eggs would not rattle. The sheriff's chair scraped. "Enough," Avery said. "We don't wager people." Jeb's smile tightened to a line. His friend Elias, quiet, broad-shouldered, shifted as if to rise. Jeb lifted a hand. He looked toward the doorway where Rose stood. He noticed the straight shoulders, the neat mends, the steady fingers. Something in him paused. Rose did not drop her eyes. She had lived through loss. A room full of laughs was not the worst thing she had faced. "No woman's a bet," Jeb said. His voice carried. "Say my pride is loud, fine, but keep widows off your table." Silence pressed. The rival smelled a new sport. "Then prove it," he said. "Marry her without the bet. Put land where your mouth is. Be a shelter for once." Rose's heart knocked, then settled. She had not come for this, but talk rolled downhill fast and buried women. Not today. She stepped into the light. "Sheriff," she asked, eyes on Jeb, "does the law stop a woman from setting her own terms?" "No, ma'am," Avery said. "Then hear mine." Her voice stayed level. "If a man thinks my name suits a wager, he owes me an apology in public. If a man thinks marriage is a game, he can keep playing without me. I will not be one. But if a man asks in daylight with respect, I will listen." The rival laughed too loudly. No one joined. Jeb touched his brim. "Then I'll ask plain. Rose Harper, will you marry me?" Avery muttered. A cup clinked on the floor. Rose kept still. She thought of her burned roof, the bare table, the dry creek that might be coaxed with care. She thought of gossip and how it chewed. Dignity felt like a thin plate held over fire. She lifted her chin. "I will," she said, "with a boundary. This is a bargain of work and safety. No husband rights, no claims. We speak simply and truthfully. We divide the labor fare. We sign the terms. If either breaks them, we part. Do you accept, Mr. Callahan?" Pride flared in Jeb and steadied like a lamp finding its wick. He nodded. "I accept." The room breathed again. Avery found his voice. "Then do it in daylight," he said. "Witnessed clean." Elias fetched paper and a pencil stump. Jeb watched Rose. She laid her basket on the counter, set 1 jar of jam beside the paper like a seal. Rose wrote, "Names. Work to be shared. Money kept in a tin both could unlock. Sleeping quarters separate. Sundays quiet if the weather allowed." The letters were careful and dark. Jeb added his name beneath hers. Avery read, nodded, and signed as a witness. The rival tried one last push. "Cold wedding," he said. "No kiss?" Rose capped the pencil and met his eyes. She did not answer him. She looked to Jeb. "We ride at noon," she said. "I need an hour to fetch my trunk." Jeb tipped his hat. "Elias will hitch the wagon." Avery stood so that the room had to look at him. What happened here, he said, was not a joke. A woman set terms. A man agreed. That's the news. Rose lifted her basket. Sunlight flooded the open door and turned dust to a drift of ash. She stepped into the street, back straight, step sure. Pride was loud, but respect could be louder in time. The wedding happened before noon, as the sheriff asked. Sun stood straight overhead like a judge with no patience. The whole town seemed to pause at the steps of the little courthouse, where a thin cotton flag clicked against its pole. Rose set her trunk on the porch. It was small, one dress folded tight, a Bible with the edges singed, a hairbrush missing teeth, and a paper packet of garden seeds she had planned to trade for sugar. She smoothed her skirt with work-rough hands. Inside her chest, fear paced, then sat. Jeb arrived with Elias in the wagon. The team stamped and blew. Elias kept his eyes on the reins, giving space, but his hat brim dipped to Rose, a quiet sign of respect. Jeb's jaw looked carved. He had shaved in a hurry. A clean line ran under rough skin. Sheriff Avery came out, spectacles down his nose. "If you're set," he said, "we'll keep it simple." "We are," Rose said. "Simple," Jeb echoed. They stood facing each other on the porch. No flowers, no lace. The sun made everything honest. A crowd formed at a distance. Mrs. Callow from the store, 2 ranch hands from the North Range. The preacher at the corner with his arms folded, the rival skulking behind a post. Children leaned on the hitch rail, eyes wide. One line would redraw the whole town. Avery opened his book, then closed it again and used his own words. "Marriage is work," he said. "Hard work. If you're making a contract of work and safety, say so plainly. Do you both agree to the terms written and signed? Separate rooms, shared money, fair labor, Sundays quiet, no claims beyond what is named?" "I agree," Rose said. "I agree," Jeb said. "If either breaks the terms, you part without blame," Avery went on. "You still keeping that line?" "We are," Rose said, and Jeb gave one sharp nod. Avery looked at them with a long, fatherly tiredness. "Then speak vows fit for the truth you've chosen." Rose drew a breath. Smoke memory brushed her tongue. She swallowed it. "I vow to be steady," she said, voice even. "I will cook and keep accounts. I will mend. I will help with calves when needed. I will watch the sky and the fences. I will not be shamed." She paused, then added softer, "I will speak honestly." Jeb's hands flexed as if holding a rope. "I vow to provide shelter and food," he said. "I will pay debts. I will listen before I speak. I will not raise a hand nor a harsh word. I will give respect in public and in private. I will not claim more than we wrote." The porch boards creaked. A breeze tugged the flag. The cotton clicked. Avery squared his shoulders. "By the authority of the county and with these witnesses, I bind you to your own words." He shut the book like a gate. That's it. There were no rings. Jeb reached into his coat and brought out a strip of clean rawhide. He tied it around Rose's wrist, not tight, not loose. "For the work we're binding," he said. The rawhide felt cool and firm. Rose lifted her left hand and knotted a small blue ribbon from her trunk around Jeb's wrist. It had been her sister's. Blue stood out against his sun-browned skin like sky water. "Witnessed," Avery said. He signed the county page. Elias stepped forward to add his name in slow, careful letters. His pencil grip looked almost delicate for such a big hand. The rival coughed a laugh. No one echoed it. The preacher finally walked closer. He did not bless, but he nodded once to Rose, a slight allowance. Mrs. Callow pressed forward with a small paper sack. "Bread ends," she said. "Waste not." Rose took it with thanks and felt heat prickle behind her eyes. She blinked it clear. "Load up," Jeb told Elias. They moved to the wagon. Rose lifted her trunk. Jeb put a hand under the other side. Their fingers did not meet. The weight was shared easily. He offered a hand to help her up. She chose the wheel spoke and climbed on her own. Jeb did not seem slighted. On the seat, the rawhide on Rose's wrist kissed the wood every time the wagon jolted. Elias gave them the reins and took the second horse to ride ahead. Town noise thinned. The track west opened like a narrow book, and the pages turned one by one under the wheels. Jeb drove without chatter. He pointed with a chin when they passed the windmill that sometimes froze, the creek that ran sweet in spring and stubborn in summer, the cottonwoods where a hawk lived. Silence sat between them, calm as shade under cottonwoods at noon there. Dust lifted from the wagon wheels as they left town. The track west thinned to pale ruts. Rose kept her back straight. She had agreed to work and safety. Now she needed to see the place. The Callahan ranch rose from the grass like a thought half finished. A low sodden plank house sat inside a square fence. One window showed a crack like a frost line. The porch slouched. A tin rooster turned without wind. To the south, a barn leaned into its own shadow. 3 paddocks showed chewed dirt near the gates and tufted grass far corners. The water trough shone bright, too clean. A windmill clicked and stuck. Jeb drew the team to a halt. Dust walked past them and lay down. He did not offer a hand. Rose did not need it. She stepped to earth and smelled ash under horse and hay. A black ring by the yard showed a burn pile. Elias loosened the harness. He worked quietly and surely. He pushed the fan. It creaked 2 turns and stopped again. Inside, heat waited. The front room held a table, 2 chairs, and a stove with a cracked foot. Nail ghosts dotted the walls. A dusty rose pressed behind glass sat crooked on a shelf. Rose thought about how fire can blacken, but heat can raise bread. She set the thought aside. Jeb put her trunk inside the door. "You can take the small room," he said. "North wall. I use the bunk by the kitchen when I'm late." The small room held a narrow bed, a peg, and a greased window. Air smelled of soap and leather. She set her Bible on the shelf. The blue ribbon ends brushed the page. She folded her dress and laid it smooth. Space made its own rules. She met them with order. Terms are just ink until the first test. Back at the table, the signed contract lay like a compass. "House rules," Jeb said. "Say them so we both hear." "We rise before first light," Rose said. "Coffee, bread if there is flour. I keep accounts in the ledger. We lock money in the tin with 2 keys. We share tools and return them clean. We ask before we take the other's time." Jeb nodded once. "I ride fence at sunup," he said. "Brand in spring. Drives when the grass is ready. Set meals as you see fit. Tell me when the windmill sticks. I'll bring oil." Rose looked out the window. "The paddocks eat themselves near the gates," she said. "Move the salt to the far corners. Make them travel." His eyes flicked to her. "Do it," he said. "The water looks bright," she added. "Too much scrubbing. Sickness last year." He gave a nod. "The creek ran low. Then we keep buckets for drinking and buckets for washing," she said. "We mark them. No mixing." Elias came in with a sack of nails. He waited. Jeb tipped his chin. "North fence sags near the cottonwoods," Elias said. "Post is soft. I can cut a new one if the saw holds." Rose touched the stove's foot. "Brick is the wrong shape," she said. "It steals heat. I'll trade for a flat stone." "We're low on eggs," Jeb said. "I'll set rabbit traps and trade pelts," she answered. "Where's the smokehouse?" "Lean-to back of the barn." She went out to see. The roof wore holes as small as coins. The yard showed boot prints that dragged when tired. Work here ran on late rides and repairs pushed off by distance and weather. Not waste by choice, waste by hurry. Back inside, she set coffee to boil and wrote a list: flat stone, fence post, windmill oil, salt blocks, seed for dry times. Under it she wrote small, roses maybe, and crossed it out so her heart would not reach too far too soon. Jeb drank coffee standing, as if rest would slide off. "Supper?" he asked. "Dried beans," she said. "Cornbread if there's time. If not, ash cakes." "Beans," he said and stepped to the door. "I'll see to the trough." Silence settled after he left. Rose liked it. It revealed small sounds, the tick of cooling metal, a fly's skitter, her breath steadying. She opened the window. Air moved, thin and honest. She laid kindling and built a fire. Flames held. "Keep steady," she told herself. Order the day. Take ground and hold it. At dusk, the windmill turned slowly. Beans simmered. She found half an onion dry as paper. She shaved it thin and added it. The room smelled like hope. They ate quietly. Jeb wiped his bowl with a heel of bread. Elias stood. "I'll sleep in the barn," he said. "Good night," Rose said. "Night," Jeb answered. They banked the fire and set the two keys in their places. Work and safety. It was a start. Morning began before light. Rose woke to the thin blue of the window and the soft cough of the stove. She tied her hair, washed at the drinking bucket, and set the coffee. Flour measured even, salt pinched clean, fire coaxed from last night's coals. The heat rose steadily. She walked the yard with a ledger under her arm. The ground was hard near the gates, softer at the far corners. She moved salt blocks to the distant fences. Cattle lifted their heads, puzzled, then followed hunger. Hooves broke the crust where grass waited. Elias hauled a post and set it by the cottonwoods, working the dull saw with patience. Jeb rode the north line, checking the wire. Rose patched the smokehouse roof with tin. When the wind pushed, it held and did not whine. In the kitchen, she boiled water for washing and kept the drinking bucket clean. She cut a strip of cloth and wrote "drink" in dark ink, tied it to the handle. The wash bucket got a knot of red thread. At the windmill, the fan clicked and stuck. She climbed the ladder, boots careful on worn rungs, oil can in her pocket, rag at her belt. She found the pinch point, worked grit loose and fed oil until the joint shone. When she climbed down, the fan turned slowly as prayer. The trough rippled. Quiet work changes loud places. She laid out tools on a cloth inside the door. Hammer, awl, twine, whetstone. After use, she wiped each and laid it back. Midday, 2 hands from the South Range rode in. Boys, really. One had a nose that peeled like paper. They shifted when they saw Rose at the table with the ledger open. "You eat," she said. "Beans and cold cornbread. Coffee if you need it." They ate shyly. She asked their names once and remembered. She handed each a strip of cloth for the back of the neck, soaked cool. The boy with the peeling nose closed his eyes when the cloth touched his skin. "Thank you, ma'am," he breathed. In the afternoon, she set rabbit snares near the brush line and marked the spots with piles of stones. On the way back, she stopped by a bare patch behind the barn. She scraped a shallow bed, mixed ash into the dirt, and buried kitchen scraps. She watered the light, then covered the soil with straw. Supper was stew stretched with beans and a bone Jeb had saved. She baked ash cakes on the stove door and rubbed the stove foot with lard. After they ate, she brushed crumbs into her hand, not the floor. Nights carried coyote song. The first night, the sound felt like a dare. By the third, it felt like a fence you could trust, loud and outside. On the fourth morning, the grocer's boy brought a parcel, a stone wrapped in sacking and a note from Mrs. Callow. Trade accepted, 4 jars of jam for 1 stone. Rose set the stone under the stove foot. Heat rose true. She mended a saddle strap with thread waxed on beeswax. She patched Jeb's shirt elbow with cloth cut from the hem of her extra skirt. Neat, almost invisible. He said nothing but wore it the next day. At the creek, she studied banks chewed by hooves. She set a line of brush to slow water when it came, drove slender stakes and wove willow between. Elias watched from his horse. "That hold?" he asked. "It will whisper the water slower," she said. "Mud will fall. Grass can take root." He nodded once. Sunday stayed quiet. Rose read 2 pages from her singed Bible and folded the ribbon there. Monday brought dry wind. Dust rolled like breath from a giant. Rose swept the porch and hung wet sheets to cool the room. Jeb came in, drank from the drink bucket, and set the dipper back without a drip. He looked at the sheets. She spared the word. He nodded. She bartered rabbit pelts in town for salt and needles. The preacher's wife eyed her rawhide wrist. "Is it hard?" "Work is work," Rose said. "Some of it grows." By week's end, lines straightened. Tools had places. The windmill turned without complaint. The boys from the South Range returned and left a bouquet of wild roses on the porch rail. Thorny. No note. Rose set them in a jar beside the dusty pressed flower. That night, Jeb stood in the doorway, hat in hand. Fence held, he said. Cattle spread farther, she nodded. Stew's warm. He came to the table. Quiet stretched, not empty. It carried the sound of the fan outside, turning slowly, a patient hand over the ranch. Ash lay cold in the stove, ready to stir tomorrow. She closed the ledger and set her palm on its cover. Not everything was fixed, but the edges no longer frayed. Monday began with a talk. Word of the courthouse vows walked ahead of Rose. In town, people paused a beat too long. At the store, Mrs. Callow was kind but careful. Men changed volume around her. Rose bought salt, needles, and flour. She felt eyes on the rawhide at her wrist. Outside, the preacher met her by the pump. He spoke mildly, which cut deeper. You made a bargain, he said. People ask what it teaches. Work, Rose said. And respect. Respect often rides best with ceremony, he said. Some say a wife without a husband's claim is a door left open. Then shut your eyes if the draft bothers you, she answered, gentler than it sounded. We wrote what we needed to live without shame. He nodded and stepped aside. Elias waited by the reins. He set a small pot on the seat. For your hands, he murmured. Inside was tallow salve and a soft cloth. Rose rubbed a little where rope and tools had chewed. It smelled of pine. Midweek, the church women came. They arrived like a wind change. 3 stood on the porch with a basket. Rose opened the door. We brought bread, Mrs. Porter said, lips tight, and a few things for a new household. Thank you, Rose said. She set the basket on the table. Inside were loaves, pickled beets, and a pamphlet about order at home. Mrs. Porter's eyes slid to the 2 keys on their nails. We heard you have a ledger for your agreement, she said. We thought you lacked guidance. We have guidance, Rose said. We wrote it down. A younger woman blurted. Do you sleep in the same house? Yes, Mrs. Porter folded her arms. A woman's honor is kept by her choices, Rose said. And by the respect of the house she keeps. Silence moved. The youngest woman's eyes caught the jar of wild roses. Those are lovely, she said, softer. They were a gift, Rose said. Gifts come with motives. Mrs. Porter sniffed. Sometimes with thorns, Rose said. I handle both carefully. They left, faces tight. When the wagon left, Rose sat at the table, palms flat, breathing even. The bread smelled warm. She sliced it, set a heel aside for Elias, and carried 2 thick pieces to the fence post where Jeb would see. Later in town, pushback sharpened. The saloon rival called across the street, loud enough for all. How's the cold house, Mrs. Callahan? Frostbite yet? Rose did not stop. Cold keeps meat from spoiling, she said. It also clears the head. 2 boys barked a laugh, then stilled when the sheriff stepped out. Avery's face held no smile. The rival studied a window frame. At the store, Mrs. Callow bagged sugar slowly. A woman behind Rose said, not quite. She set her own rules and made a fool of him. Rose turned. If you speak of my husband, use his name, she said. If you speak of me, use mine. If you need something, name it. If not, save your breath for your own work. Color rose in the woman's face. Mrs. Callow slid the sugar and whispered, You're doing fine. By Friday, she was both example and offense. Some faces closed. Others opened. Boys tipped caps once. 2 wives nodded quickly when no one was watching. The rival glowered and kept out of the sheriff's doorway. At home, isolation nipped like cold. Rose felt it and set more work between herself and the chill. She cooked extra and sent food east through Elias. She wrote a list for the relief circle, meals, mending, water saving, and tied it to the church door with twine so the wind would not steal it. She scrubbed the table with sand and oil until it shone. She re-inked the drink sign and reweaved willow at the creek. That night the house felt wider than the walls. Jeb ate in his quiet way, He set his cup down and looked up once as if words waited at the door. He took the lantern to check the stock. Rose watched the raw light move across the yard, steady as a heartbeat. She stood at the window with the pressed rose and the wild ones beside it. One was pressed flat, the other thorned. Moonlight made them pale. Her goal sat clear. Order the house, keep people fed, protect water, shift the herd, stand straight when talk blows hard. Hold that line and talk would run out of air. Sunday came again. Rose walked into the church with her hands in steps. Some looked away. The sheriff shifted to stand where folks could see him near her pew. When the hymn rose, she sang low and simple. Ash to bread, wind to water. She did not pray for approval. She prayed for the strength to do the work. The wind turned hot by noon and stayed. Grass rattled like paper. Rose watched the herd crowd the near trough and leave the far corners untouched. She walked the fence with her ledger. Bare patches widened where hooves circled. Thin green still waded along a shallow swale beyond the cottonwoods. That swale was treated as waste, too wet in spring, too dry by summer, a strip where weeds took comfort. Rose paced its length. A lazy bed of stones held brown water under willow shade. If the swale could be taught to hold and feed instead of rush and vanish, the ranch might breathe easier. The land was keeping a secret, and she meant to hear it. She waited until evening. Jeb came home dust gray, shoulders tight. Elias followed with a coil of wire and was quiet. Rose set beans back on the stove and spread a map. 2 pages stitched with thread and pinholes from a tin lid to mark the land's ribs. This, she said, tapping the swale, is where we stop bleeding. It floods in spring, Jeb said. Drowns calves if we're foolish, and starves pasture by August, Rose answered. We chase grass that keeps running. I want to turn the chase. She set out 3 small piles, pebbles, straw, charcoal, black as night. We weave brush between stakes with stone where water bites. Cut shallow trenches that follow the land's curve. Shade the soil with straw. Mix this charcoal, burned clean, soaked in manure tea, into beds where water rests. It will hold moisture and feed the ground. Dams? Jeb's doubt held no mockery. We've no lumber to spare. Brush and rock, she said. Willows we already have. We pull silt from the swale in summer and haul it to thin places by the gates. Make the swale a bank that pays interest. Elias rolled a charcoal chip and sniffed. Doesn't stink. Burned right, Rose said. And I want to move the night pen each week, a small square of net. Bed the herd on different bare patches so manure lands where we choose. Dark soil will rise under hooves, not vanish near the trough. Jeb's jaw worked. Wire for a moving pen costs. What do we sell? My shawl can go, Rose said. I'll trap more rabbits. Or we sell 2 yearlings now and save the grass they'd take. 2 yearlings, he said, before the market sours. They rose before first light. Elias sharpened the saw. Jeb and Rose hauled brush from the creek. Willows yielded. They cut stakes from straight saplings and carried them in bundles 2 by 2 like rails. By noon, a check weir stood like a low rib across the swale. Water lapped and did not fight. Rose wove the brush tightly, pushed silt into gaps until her nails ran black. Elias packed stones with a current bit. Jeb leaned on each stake and said nothing when it held. After noon, Rose burned a barrel of brush slowly under dirt. The charcoal hissed when she doused it, then drank manure tea. She spread it on the damp bed and pressed in drought grass seed with her boot. The smell turned deep and clean, like rain waiting in the ground. They stretched a light wire for the night pen on a square of dust near the gate. The herd crowded, shuffled, settled. Rose walked the fence and felt the day's line go straight inside her chest. At supper, hunger made words plain. If this works, Jeb said, we owe you. We owe the land, Rose said. It feeds us if we feed it. Elias lifted his tin cup. To small holds, he said. They touched cups. Morning brought proof as seed. The swale slid and left a ribbon of silt behind the weir. At the trough, cows drank more slowly and glanced toward the far grass. Rose shifted the salt to the far corner and watched the herd travel, spread and calm. She marked the night pen square on her map with the blue pencil she kept for hope. She moved the pen one length over and smiled when her boot sank into softened dirt. In town, she traded jam for spare wire and a handful of turnip seed. The rival watched from the saloon porch because the sheriff stood in the doorway. By week's end, 3 ribs of brush crossed the swale. A narrow rock fan armored the creek crossing. The moving pen had painted a dark quilt of squares near the gate. The windmill turned without complaint. Numbers still looked hard in the ledger, but the land no longer felt like a bucket with a hole. It felt like a hand learning to hold. Jeb came in late, hat under his arm, and stood over the map. He touched the blue marks with one finger. "Cautious buy-in," he said. "But I'm in." Rose met his eyes. "Good," she said. "Tomorrow we teach the next bend to listen. If you're with Rose so far, a quick like helps more listeners find this story." Heat held on the land like a hand that would not lift. Clouds built thin and vanished. The creek slid lower and showed stones like ribs. Rose listened to the windmill's faint whine and felt the week lean heavy. Numbers went bad in the ledger. Salt, nail, seed, and wire each cost more than planned. Jeb sold 2 yearlings early as they agreed, but the buyer came hard. Prices had fallen after a herd downriver flooded the pens. The grocer took the jam but paid only in credit. Credit did not mend fences. The herd walked farther because she moved the salt, yet tongues lolled when the afternoon burned. Cows tested the new brush ribs. They held but drank silt brown. Elias cut another steak and pressed it deep with his shoulder. "Hold," he whispered. The stick did. Just when the ground began to hold, the numbers didn't. A bank letter came on Thursday. Jeb stood by the door and read it twice. He folded it and slid it under the ledger. Rose saw the stamp and felt a chill. "How much?" she asked. 2 notes due by harvest," he said. "One at the store, one at the bank." Grass was meant to carry more head. It didn't. "We carry less," she said, "and sell where the river isn't crowded. Means a drive south," he said. Early, in town, pressure turned faces sharp. The rival called, "Hear the bank whistling?" Rose did not stop. "Roofs fall when men talk instead of nails," she said. The sheriff's look ended the talk. Back home, the swale kept its ribbon, but not enough. The night pen moved square by square. Dark patches grew, but the sky refused rain. That evening, Rose set a potato and the heel of bacon to boil with beans. Jeb washed and sat with elbows quiet, eyes on the map. Elias leaned near the door like a post that remembered storms. "We can stretch feed for 2 weeks if we cut oats with straw," Rose said. "Cull 3 old cows now and save grass for the young." "Old cows sell poorly," Jeb said. "They eat the same," she answered. He rubbed his jaw. "We ride at dawn. South pens. I'll pack bread and jerked rabbit," she said. "Take water skins and wet bandanas." Jeb's eyes lifted a fraction. "You've driven before?" "I have watched men drive poorly," she said. That was lesson enough. Silence sat, not cold, only honest. She set his cup where his hand would find it. He nodded. That night the wind woke mean and pushed grit through the cracks. Rose counted breaths until she heard Jeb's boots cross the floor. The back door opened, then closed. She stepped into the kitchen. He was there, bareheaded, the blue ribbon on his wrist dark in lantern light. He was oiling the reins slowly, each pull the same length. "How bad is the bank?" she asked again, softer. "Bad enough to forget pride," he said. "Not bad enough to forget my word." "Your word keeps this house from shaking," she said. "My work keeps water where it can. Between those we will make a bridge." He set the reins down. "You shouldn't have to build bridges for a dare I took." "We are here now," she said. "We choose what to build." Something eased behind his face. "All right," he said. "Tell me what to tie next." She named 3 steps. Move the pen, cut the old cows, stitch sacks for seed to carry south. He listened as if thirsty. Near midnight, heat lightning flared on the far ridge and faded without rain. Dawn did not cool. They moved like a practiced crew. Elias with the gate, Jeb with the lead cow, Rose handing up bread, water, and a flour sack flag to signal turns. As the herd pushed out, dust lifted like smoke. It stung, but they did not run. When the yard emptied, quiet fell hard. Rose stood by the windmill and felt the weight of a day she could not carry with her hands. She walked to the swale and pressed her palm to the damp soil behind the brush rib. Cool still lived there. She let that cool feed her spine. Then she opened the ledger. Ink weighted like a narrow road. She drew 2 lines, one for what was left with the herd, one for what must hold here. She sharpened the pencil and began. Pressure did not lift. It taught her where she was strong. All vows sound sturdy until the sky turns to fire. The wind changed at noon. It came hot from the west, smelling of pitch. Rose stepped from the kitchen and saw a brown smear turn black and move. Smoke rose. She rang the iron triangle. Fire, she called. Ash fell like gray snow. The windmill spun and rattled. Elias had ridden out with Jeb and the herd before dawn. Only 2 South Range boys were near, the one with the peeling nose and his lanky friend. They ran from the barn with buckets. Listen, Rose said, steady. We don't fight the front. We win the edges. Wet cloths. Fill every bucket. Soak the porch, roof, and woodpile. Then the east post. They ran. She hauled the drinking bucket to the door and dipped rags. She tied one over her mouth and nose. The swale, she thought. If anything holds, the swale will. She dragged a barrel to the trough while the windmill could still keep up. She dunked burlap and threw wet sheets against the west wall. Between the cottonwoods the fire showed, low then tall. It ate grass and flung sparks ahead. A west fence post coughed flame. Cows bawled. Cut the near fence, she told the boys. Push the herd to the swale. Keep them moving, go. They stared for one breath. She didn't blink. They went. At the paddock gate she sliced the wire with Jeb's cutters. The herd surged, then balked. She flapped a wet sack and the cows poured through. She and the boys drove them toward the brush ribs. The swale still held damp where the sun could not drink. At the water-dark soil they slowed. Rose pulled a white-faced calf by its halter and let it hock deep where mud cooled. Wind threw sparks. The porch edge caught. She ran for the bucket line, climbed, and slapped the rim with a wet rag until steam rose. The peeling nose boy coughed and kept working. His friend's hands shook, but his aim stayed true. Good, she said. Breathe slow. Fire reached the night-penned squares, the quilt of trampled ground, and paused. Finding little to eat, it turned to dry beyond. The squares bought time. The barn's lean-to smoked. The smokehouse roof showed orange. Rose pulled the door. Heat hit her face. She dropped and crawled, soaked her shawl, and flogged the hole until steam fogged her eyes. A beam cracked. She rolled out, sucking air. Back to the line, she told herself. At the swale the herd stood calmer. Wind threw fire at the brush ribs. The first weir hissed. Flame climbed and then faltered where willow and wet silt interlaced. Pull mud, Rose called. She shoveled with a short spade, dumping damp earth onto edges that glowed. The boys copied. Fire gave ground where mud kissed it. A scream cut the wind. Human. Beyond the cottonwoods, 2 hands from the north line galloped, fire behind them. One horse stumbled at the fence and threw its rider. The man hit dirt and didn't rise. Rose ran. Stay with the herd, she shouted, and went south along the fence where smoke thinned. The other rider circled, shouting his friend's name. Flame found dry grass and began to draw a circle. Rose pulled the rope from her shoulder. She caught the frightened horse on the second throw and pulled its head toward the gap at the paddock gate. The horse fought, then felt the line and gave. She shoved the rider's boot into the stirrup. Through the gap, she said, slapping the rump. The horse plunged and went. She reached the fallen man, rolled him, and saw his eyes open in ash. Up, she said. She tied a wet cloth over his face, hooked her arm under his and dragged. She didn't look back. She looked at the swale. They stumbled, crawled, then ran the last yards where air moved. Behind them, the brush rib glowed and held, then hissed dark as water moved through. At the edge of the swale, Elias burst from the haze with Jeb at his shoulder. Dust black, bandanas soaked. They had turned the herd south and raced the smoke home. Take him, Rose said. And they did. She didn't stop. Hold the west edge. Mud here and here. She pointed. The map lived behind her eyes. They worked until the wind grew bored. Smoke thinned. Denied easy food, the fire went east and died. Evening found them on the porch step, black with soot. The boys sat with their heads in their hands. The north hand breathed shallow, alive. Jeb looked at the swale, the black squares, the wet sheets, the cut fence, the saved barn. He looked at Rose last. You saved them, he said. We saved what we could, she said, letting her head rest against the post. The windmill clicked once. In the dark, embers winked in the field. The ranch stood. So did they. Morning broke pale and used up. Smoke still clung to the cottonwoods. Rose woke with grit in her teeth and a sting in both palms. Outside, the yard looked like a battlefield that had decided to keep breathing. Elias had slept on the porch with the north hand propped against his side. Jeb had kept watch by the ruined fence. They walked the line slowly. The brush ribs were scorched but standing. Mud had baked into dark plates where flame had tried to bite. The night pen squares showed black hoof marks like stitches. The smokehouse roof sagged but did not fall. Count the head, Jeb said. They counted. Loss was smaller than fear had promised. A calf limped. Rose wrapped its leg with a cool cloth and talked to it under her breath. By noon, town voices came on the wind. The preacher and Mrs. Callow arrived with buckets and bread. 2 ranchers brought posts. The grocer's boy hauled water. Even the rival came, jaw tight, and worked the shovel without a word. Sheriff Avery stood at the swale and watched water creep where it could. That held, he said. It listened, Rose answered. He tipped his hat. Then we'll listen better. At dusk, the porch filled with dishes and tired bodies. The rival set his cup down and met Rose's eyes. I was wrong, he said. About you. About this. Thank you, she answered. When the dark made people ready for their own beds, they went. The yard fell quiet. Inside, Rose washed her hands and watched soot leave in ribbons. She bound her palms with salve from Elias's pot. Jeb came to the doorway and leaned his shoulder there, hat in hand, eyes steady but not hard. You saved my men, he said. We saved each other, she said. The swale did its share. He glanced at the map tacked to the wall. You taught me to see it. Silence gathered, not as distance but as room for breath. He set the bank letter on the table. I can't carry this alone, he said. Pride is heavy and dumb. Then we carry it even and smart, she said. Call what eats too much. Write the South buyers directly. Keep the pen moving, the swale listening. Let neighbors repay today by taking fence lines in trade. Show them how to build ribs for their own swales. Trade knowledge. Jeb's mouth lifted a fraction. A dirt school. A school for not losing, she said. He pulled out the chair and sat. He had never done that at the talk's start. Tell me the plan line by line. They wrote until the lantern burned clear. She named tasks and he did not resist. He named risks and she adjusted rotes. Elias poured coffee and listened. When the last line curled under her pencil, Jeb looked at her rawhide wrist. About the boundary, he said. I will keep it as long as you ask. I would also like to ask for more someday if that becomes honest. She set her hand flat so the ribbon ends lay quietly. Respect is first. Without it, nothing grows. With it, maybe more can. He nodded. I will wait without pressure. Then we can work without fear, she said. They banked the lantern. The house did not feel cold. It felt awake. Morning sent them out with the same map in mind. Rose took the wagon east with Elias to trade labor for fence repairs. She showed 2 men how to stack brush and stone so the water would slow. They watched, doubtful then hopeful. They paid in posts and a bag of seed. In town, Mrs. Porter came with a basket and a different face. We're organizing a water day, she said. Women want to learn. Show us the night pen. Show us the bucket marks. Tomorrow at dawn, Rose said. Word ran. The boys followed her to the creek. She taught them to weave willow. She let them pound stakes and praised straight hits. She put the youngest on watch and called him foreman until his back straightened. That night the ranch lay quiet. Stars came clear. The pressed rose looked darker. The wild ones had dried into tough cups. Jeb came in late, dusted. He set a paper parcel on the table. Inside lay 3 rose slips wrapped in damp cloth. From Mrs. Callow's sister, he said. Rooted cuttings. She said a yard that survives a fire deserves roses that can too. Rose held them like newborn birds. She set them in a pan of water and touched the raw hide on her wrist. We'll plant them by the swale, she said. Where the ground remembers. Jeb smiled with his eyes. Partners, then. Partners, she said. Outside, wind moved in the cottonwoods, a quiet promise not to break. Respect is earned in private, but proven in public. The town gathered on a bright Saturday, a week after the fire. Banners hung limp in the still heat. They called it Water Day. Fence lessons, brush weaving, a small market, and a stock auction to help families who lost sheds and feed. Sheriff Avery spoke clearly and stepped aside. Rose set a table with buckets marked drink and wash, a coil of moving pen wire, and a pan where willow cuttings rooted. Women crowded close. Boys begged to pound steaks. Jeb stood near but did not speak for her. By noon the crowd drifted to the auction pen. A trader from the rail yards eyed the Callahan herd and a sketch of the ranch pinned on a post. He bragged about buying land from overstretched operators. Rose felt the old shame try to rise. She did not let it. Mail came at 2. Mrs. Callow handed Rose a thick envelope and a thin one. The thin letter wore a bank seal. The thick one bore a Missouri stamp from an aunt who once sent a ribbon. Rose read both in the cottonwood shade. The bank would roll the notes if they sold the east pasture, ground that fed the swale. The aunt's letter held a bank draft big enough to buy a small house in town. Come east. Run a rooming house with me. Be free. Freedom meant a roof, coins, women at the table, and no smoke at night. It also meant leaving the work she had begun, the herd, the map, the men who trusted her hands, and Jeb's careful listening. Avery rang the bell. The rail trader waved his hat and offered numbers for the east pasture. Rose slid the letters under the ledger in her satchel. She looked at the swale. The brush ribs glowed green where water touched them. She looked at Jeb. He watched her, not the trader. She walked to the front of the pen. Before bidding, she said, voice steady, I'll say what these mean to me. A bank wants a quick sale. My kin offers a safe room far from drought. Both are kind. But this land learned to listen. So did we. We will not sell the east pasture. It feeds the swale. And I will not leave the work. I choose this house, this herd, and this partner. The trader frowned and moved on. The preacher nodded. Mrs. Porter clapped first, certain. Others joined. Avery lifted a hand for quiet and finished the auction with the other lots. Jeb stepped to Rose when the crowd spread again. You had an open door, he said low. I shut it myself, she said. Not from fear, from choice. Elias brought the ledger and a pencil stub. Then we make the numbers fit the choice, he said. They did. They kept the east pasture. They sold 3 old cows at a fair price to neighbors who now valued shade and small holdings. They offered to show brush ribs to anyone who traded posts or seed. By sundown, the bank's roll terms were smaller, and the notes could be met with a hard season's work. The preacher asked them to speak that evening at the hall. Not a sermon, he said, a telling. Jeb cleared his throat. I took a loud dare, he said. She answered with quiet work. I am learning. Rose spoke of buckets, salt, and the swale. No one laughed. A week later, they planted the rose slips by the swale. Elias set a fence to keep the hooves back. Water in the soil held like a kept promise. Summer bowed out. Autumn worked gently. Winter came thin but not cruel. They moved the pen and taught neighbors. They paid the first note, then the second. Pride bent into something useful, steady back, open hands. 1 year after the fire, the ranch looked different. Grass lay wide and soft. The swale wore 4 green ribs. Small pools lasted 3 days after rain. Calves stood thick-legged. The smokehouse roof lay tight. The windmill spun without complaint. The map on the wall showed more blue lines than black scratches. On a warm evening, they walked to the roses. Blooms opened low, tough cups pink with a darker seam like memory. Jeb touched the rawhide on his wrist. Then the blue ribbon on hers faded but sound. I would like, he said, to ask again, not from a dare. From a year of days. Rose looked at the blooms, at the herd beyond, at the water that held. Respect had grown here like a tree. It threw shade. Yes, she said simply. Because we made this together. He did not reach for her. He offered his open hand. She set hers in it. The cottonwoods answered in leaf. The wind carried no ash. Only the smell of water and roses now. If this redemptive Western moved you, tap like so YouTube shows it to more listeners. Hit subscribe and the bell for more clean, slow burn romances every week. Tell me in the comments, which moment proved Rose's strength for you? And if you know someone who needs a hopeful story tonight, share this with them.